I think the next few weeks in General Hospital are setting up something that feels less like everyday drama in Port Charles and more like a chain reaction of bad decisions, buried secrets, and people walking straight into danger without realizing how close the fire really is. From where I'm looking at it, the week of April 27th to May 1st already feels like the spark. Ethan Lovett comes in with a proposal that instantly raises the stakes, taking Jen Sidwell out permanently. And what stands out to me is not just the offer itself, but the fact that Sonny Corinthos is actually considering it. That alone tells me the situation is slipping into a much darker space than usual. At the same time, Curtis Ashford seems determined to prove Isaiah Gannon was behind the wheel in the hit-and-run situation. But I can't ignore what viewers already know, that it looks more like Brooklyn Quartermain may be tied to what really happened. That gap between what characters believe and what's actually true is where I think everything starts to unravel. Michael Corinthos, on the other hand, seems focused on strategy. He's plotting against Willow Kane, and I get the sense this isn't just personal anymore, it's becoming tactical, especially with Elizabeth Baldwin pushing forward Drew Kane's communication-related developments. Willow being caught in the middle makes me think she's about to be pulled in multiple directions with no easy way out. And then there's Carly Spencer and Valentine Cassadine. I think their situation is heading toward a breaking point. Carly's usual streak of luck looks like it's about to end, especially as Jack Brennan starts putting the pieces together. If he really starts digging into her home, I don't think it will stay surface level for long. It feels like he's on the verge of uncovering something far more complicated than a simple secret. Moving into the week of May 4th to May 8th, I think things escalate even further. If Brennan discovers the truth about Valentine being connected to Carly, whether as a lover, hidden presence, or partner in something much bigger, it feels like a confrontation is inevitable. That's the kind of reveal that doesn't just shake relationships, it resets alliances entirely. Around the same time, Michael James Scott arriving in Port Charles adds a lighter surface moment, but even that feels tied into something bigger when Gio Palmieri's Broadway connection leads to a performance opportunity at the Savoy. In this world, even the positive moments usually sit right next to something unstable. Meanwhile, Dante Falconeri keeps digging into Ross Cullum's shooting, and I think he's getting closer to a truth that's been carefully buried. If Isaiah is forced to admit where he really was that night, and that he treated Rocco Falconeri at Lulu Spencer's place, it creates a direct path for Dante to eventually confront Lulu. I don't think that confrontation will be gentle. It feels like one of those storylines where every answer leads to a worse question. Looking ahead to May 11th to May 15th, I keep coming back to Ethan's mysterious voicemail. It's still unclear who he was trying to reach when he returned to Port Charles, and that uncertainty is what makes it feel important rather than incidental. I think Jacinda Bracken could be part of that thread, especially if there's a connection from her time in Australia. But there's also a darker possibility. Ethan may have ties to Delilah Wilson without even realizing she's already dead. Either way, I don't think this is a loose end that stays loose for long. Sonny and Rick Lansing both seem to sense that Ethan is withholding something, which usually means pressure is building on all sides. And then there's Danny Morgan, who might decide to take matters into his own hands regarding Sidwell. I think his anger over Jason's situation is pushing him into dangerous territory, and in Port Charles, that kind of personal mission rarely ends cleanly. To me, all of this points in one direction. The next few weeks aren't just about isolated conflicts. They're about secrets converging. People think they're solving problems, but they may actually be stepping deeper into them. I think what stands out to me in this upcoming General Hospital stretch is how tightly everything is starting to interlock. Almost like every conversation is quietly feeding into a much larger storm that nobody fully sees yet. When I look at Jen Sidwell, I get the sense that his confidence is starting to crack, just slightly. I was wondering if that suspicion around him is less about what others know and more about what he fears might be exposed. He doesn't feel like a man who tolerates uncertainty, so even small doubts around him could start pushing him into more controlling, maybe even reckless territory. Then there's Sonny Corinthos, who once again finds himself pulled into conversations that feel less like business and more like tests of loyalty and power. Ethan Lovett showing up in his orbit doesn't feel casual at all. To me, it feels like Ethan is carrying something hidden beneath the surface, an agenda that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And when he casually floats something as extreme as a permanent solution, it doesn't land like simple dialogue. It feels like a line being crossed, where desperation and ambition start mixing in dangerous ways. What also caught my attention is how easily information keeps slipping between characters. Elizabeth Baldwin getting new intel tied to Jason Morgan feels important, not just because of what she learns, but because of why she's looking in the first place. I think she's not just reacting emotionally. She's trying to piece together a truth that might matter deeply to Jake's world. And when Carly Spencer steps in with what she's heard from Jack Brennan about Jason's situation, it starts to feel like layers of truth are being passed around in fragments, never fully complete in one place. At the same time, Valentine Cassadine, standing in the middle of all this, adds another layer of calculation. I didn't realize how much his actions, like impersonating Dr. Kevin Collins to dig for answers, would start shaping the direction of suspicion around Cullum. It feels like Valentine is assembling a puzzle, but he's not entirely sure what picture he's building yet. Still, he's convinced enough to start pointing fingers, which makes everything feel even more unstable. And then there's the tension building around Cassius Faison, or whatever mask he's currently wearing. Sidwell picking up on his unease doesn't feel accidental. I think Sidwell is the type who notices when someone is holding back, even a fraction of the truth. The fact that Cassius is hiding major revelations, like the shooting involving Rocco Falconeri and Britt Westbourne's interpretation of Cullum's role, makes it feel like a ticking time bomb of secrets. The more people try to contain it, the more pressure builds underneath. Even the smaller interactions, like James West's moment outside Bobby's, feel symbolic in a strange way. Sidwell reading meaning into something as simple as a karate move doesn't feel random. It feels like someone constantly scanning for signs, trying to connect behavior to intention, even when it might just be coincidence. But maybe that's exactly how paranoia starts forming in these kinds of environments. Meanwhile, Britt Westbourne's approach to Rocco feels like pure urgency. I didn't realize how far she might go to protect him, even if it means becoming confrontational or intimidating. Her warning doesn't feel like cruelty, it feels like fear translated into control. She believes danger is closing in, and she's trying to stop it before it's too late, even if her methods create more tension than safety. And underneath all of this, there's still that larger uncertainty surrounding Cullum. Who attacked him? What he knows, and how many people are now orbiting around that mystery without realizing how connected they actually are. To me, what makes all of this compelling is not just the individual secrets, but the way every character is unknowingly stepping into someone else's story. It feels like truth is circulating in pieces, and no one is holding the full version yet. I think there's a lot unfolding in this General Hospital storyline that feels less like a straightforward secret and more like a carefully layered emotional trap. To me, the setup begins with Tracy Quartermain and Brooklyn Quartermain inviting Trina Robinson to the Quartermain mansion. I was wondering at first if this would be something harmless, maybe even business-related through deception, like modeling or product testing. On the surface, that would make sense, especially with Brooklyn's involvement and the family's usual tendency to mix personal ties with business opportunities. But the more I look at it, the more I feel there's something else going on underneath the excitement. Tracy presenting Trina with a box, both she and Brooklyn appearing overly enthusiastic. It doesn't quite sit right as just a friendly gesture. I can't help but think this moment is doing double duty. One part charm offensive, one part distraction. It feels like Tracy in particular might be trying to gently steer Trina's attention away from the truth surrounding Jordan Ashford's accident. Maybe she's testing how much Trina already knows, or more strategically, how easily she can be influenced. I think it's possible Tracy believes that if she wins Trina over personally, then Trina will naturally reassure Curtis and lower his suspicions without ever realizing she's being guided in a certain direction. But I also think this kind of plan is always fragile in soap storytelling. The more people you bring into your orbit, the higher the risk that something slips. If Trina spends too much time around Brooklyn and Tracy, it wouldn't surprise me if she starts noticing inconsistencies or overhears something she wasn't meant to hear. Even a small, overheard conversation could shift everything. And that's where things start to feel more tense. If Trina begins piecing together that Brooklyn may have been connected to that night's accident, the emotional weight on her would be enormous. I don't think this would be an easy confrontation for her. She'd be torn between loyalty, morality, and the relationships she's trying to protect. What makes this even more complicated is the uncertainty around what Brooklyn actually knew in the moment. From what I understand, she didn't even realize a crash had occurred at the time. That detail changes the emotional framing slightly, but it doesn't erase responsibility or consequences. It just makes everything more complicated, more human, and more messy in a way soap operas tend to thrive on. I was also thinking about Curtis and Jordan in all of this. If Trina knows the truth, or even suspects it, she would be carrying something that directly affects her family's trust and stability. And that creates a real moral crossroads for her. Does she stay silent to protect relationships? Or does she expose the truth and risk breaking everything apart? And on top of that, Curtis already seems to be heading down a different investigative path, suspecting someone else entirely. If Trina realizes he's wrong, she's not just dealing with a secret anymore. She's dealing with misinformation, potential injustice, and the pressure of correcting a narrative that's already gaining momentum. So to me, this isn't just about a meeting at the Quartermain mansion. It feels like the beginning of a much larger emotional collision where friendship, guilt, loyalty, and truth are all being pulled in different directions. And I think that's exactly where this storyline is heading, toward a point where keeping the secret might become just as damaging as revealing it. On General Hospital, I think the current situation around Willow Tate and Drew Kane feels less like a simple fallout and more like a carefully tightening trap that could snap in either direction at any moment. From my perspective, Willow Tate is no longer just reacting emotionally. She's trying to build control. I was wondering if her decision to approach Jack Brennan is really about strategy or desperation disguised as planning. She seems convinced that somewhere there is enough damaging information on Drew Kane to secure her position, and I can't ignore how calculated that thinking has become. Brennan, though, is not someone who plays clean. To me, he feels like the kind of wild card who will absolutely take advantage of any leverage he's handed, even if it means keeping Willow tied to him in return. I didn't realize at first how fragile Drew's position actually is, until the possibility of Elizabeth Baldwin trying to give him tools to communicate came into focus. That shift changes everything. If Drew regains even a partial voice in his own situation, then Willow's control starts to slip immediately. And that's where things get darker, because the stakes aren't just emotional anymore. They're legal and potentially criminal, with accusations tied to paralysis, deception, and drugging. What stands out to me is Willow's mindset. She isn't just trying to protect herself. She's trying to decide how to contain Drew's future. In her eyes, it seems like there are only two outcomes she can offer him: revenge or prison. And I think that says a lot about how trapped she feels in her own choices. She knows Drew Cain has every reason to hate her, especially given what she believes she's done to him. Yet she's still trying to frame silence as his best possible escape. There's also this emotional pressure point with Scout Quartermain. I keep thinking that Scout isn't just a detail in this story. She's the lever that could decide Drew's entire response. The idea that he could risk losing time with her again, especially after everything tied to his condition and confinement, might be the one thing that keeps him from pushing back the way he otherwise would. And then there's Jen Sidwell, who complicates everything further. I was wondering if Willow truly understands how unstable that alliance is. Sidwell doesn't strike me as someone who offers protection without expecting something far more valuable in return. Even if he agrees to pressure Drew Cain into silence, it feels like that kind of deal always comes with a future cost that hasn't been revealed yet. To me, what makes this storyline gripping is that nobody actually feels safe, even when they think they're winning. Willow is trying to secure silence, Drew is inching toward awareness and agency again, and the people orbiting them, Brennan and Sidwell, are operating on their own hidden agendas. And I can't shake the feeling that if Drew Cain fully regains his ability to communicate, the entire balance of power collapses. What Willow sees as control might quickly turn into exposure, and whatever she's trying to contain could end up spilling out in ways she never planned for. I think what stood out to me most in these developments is how many storylines are quietly converging under the surface of control, loyalty, and consequences, even when nobody is fully saying it out loud. To me, it feels like Michael Corinthos is once again positioning himself like someone preparing for a long game. When I hear that he sets a plan in motion, I don't see urgency as much as calculation. Like he's already accepted that whatever comes next will ripple through the entire Corinthos orbit, whether people are ready or not. At the same time, Willow Tate making a deal that could put her on top feels like a different kind of ambition. I was wondering if this is really about power, or more about survival disguised as strategy. In these kinds of stories, getting ahead usually comes with a cost that only shows up later. There's also this quieter but tense legal and emotional undercurrent running through Alexis Davis, Nina Reeves, and Rick Lansing. When Alexis is talking about Danny's mob-related impulses with Sonny Corinthos, it doesn't feel like simple concern. It feels like history repeating itself in different disguises. And Nina turning to Rick for legal help suggests she's once again stepping into morally complicated territory while trying to stay in control of the outcome. I didn't realize how much emotional history still lingers between Ethan Lovett and Christina Corinthos Davis until they started reminiscing. That kind of nostalgia in soap storytelling usually isn't just filler. It often signals unresolved choices that will matter again. And Ethan asking Sonny for a job, then getting approval despite objections, makes me think Sonny is either testing loyalty or setting expectations that aren't being spoken directly. Meanwhile, on the younger end of the canvas, Rocco Falconeri seems overwhelmed by pressure building around Danny Morgan. When Rocco ends up confronting Britt and eventually admits he was responsible for shooting Cullum, I think this is one of those turning points where a secret stops being a secret and becomes a burden shared between people who may not be ready for it. What really adds tension for me is how Britt reacts. With Britt Westbourne promising to protect Rocco, I was wondering if that protection is actually about safety or about control over what happens next. In these stories, protection often blurs into containment. Elsewhere, relationships are quietly shifting shape. Curtis Ashford and Portia Robinson trying to find a truce feels fragile, especially when medical concerns and emotional distance are already in play. Even small disagreements, like checkups and invitations, start to feel symbolic rather than trivial. The investigation thread thickens when Dante Falconeri connects evidence pointing toward a black SUV, and Curtis realizes that ties back to Isaiah Gannon. I think this is where suspicion starts tightening into something more structured, like pieces finally locking into a pattern that's been there all along, but ignored. Then there's the global expansion of tension, literally. Gio Palmieri and Emma Scorpio Drake heading to New York adds a lighter surface tone, but even there, connections to the main story don't really loosen. Behind the scenes, alliances and recognitions are still forming, especially when Tracy and Ethan get interrupted by Sidwell, who immediately reads Ethan's identity in a way that feels loaded with history. I think Tracy Quartermain reuniting with Ethan, only to have it disrupted by Sidwell, is important because it shifts Ethan from being just present to being known, which always changes the stakes in these kinds of narratives. At the same time, the medical and emotional threads around Molly Lansing Davis and Cody Bell bring in a quieter kind of realism. Their conversation about intimacy and endometriosis feels like a pause in the chaos, a reminder that not all conflict is external. Some of it is deeply internal and persistent. I was also struck by how many characters are circling information rather than confronting it directly. Jocelyn Jacks bringing concerns to Lulu Spencer about Nathan West and Faison creates this sense that even supposed returns or revelations might not be what they appear to be. And when Valentine and Joss start questioning whether Nathan's resurfacing connects to something larger, it starts to feel like nobody is fully trusting reality as it's presented. Then there's Brennan offering influence, Felicia seeking help from Obrecht and being turned away, and Willow leveraging Brennan for information. Each of those moments feels like a different version of the same idea. Access is being traded like currency. Even Elizabeth's visit to Drew, noticing signals and suggesting alternative communication, adds to this pattern of people trying to reach each other indirectly, as if direct honesty is no longer the default option. To me, the most interesting part of all of this is not any single reveal, but how everything is structured around pressure building quietly until it has to break somewhere. Whether it's loyalty tests, hidden confessions, legal maneuvering, or resurfacing enemies, it all feels like a system tightening rather than expanding. And I think that's what makes this stretch of story feel like it's moving towards something unavoidable, even if no one in it fully sees the shape of it yet. I think this whole situation in Port Charles is starting to feel like one of those slow-burning storms, where every character is unknowingly walking right into the center of it. Ethan Lovett crashing at Lulu Spencer's place doesn't feel like a random arrangement to me. It feels like a setup for something bigger, like he's being quietly positioned right where he can hear things he was never meant to hear. I was wondering about Rocco Falconeri, because everything around him feels heavier than he's able to carry. There's this massive secret hanging over him involving the shooting of Ross Cullum at Pier 55, and the fact that Jason Morgan ended up taking the blame makes it even more complicated. To me, that kind of truth never really stays buried in Port Charles. It just waits for the right crack to slip through. And then Britt Westbourne being pulled into the loop changes the energy completely. I think she's doing what she always does, trying to control chaos, trying to protect someone who's already standing too close to the edge. But Rocco doesn't feel stable in any of this. I didn't realize at first how much pressure he's under, but now it feels like he's one conversation away from breaking. What makes it more interesting is Ethan's presence in all of this. I think Lulu casually suggesting that Ethan could be a positive influence for Rocco is almost ironic, because Dante Falconeri's reaction says everything without needing to say much. Ethan has always carried that reputation of being unpredictable, a bit of a con artist, someone who drifts into trouble even when he's not trying to. And yet, I can't ignore the possibility that this is exactly why he's being placed in Rocco's orbit. I was thinking about how secrets tend to move in this world, not through confessions, but through accidents. A conversation overheard, a moment of distraction, a sentence said too loudly in the wrong room. Ethan doesn't even need Rocco to tell him anything directly. It could just as easily be Lulu slipping, or Ethan catching something he wasn't supposed to hear, while tensions rise between family members. There's also something darker building underneath Ethan's return. I get the sense he's not just drifting back into Port Charles aimlessly. His connection to sunny Corinthos' world and the ongoing tension around Ross Cullum makes it feel like he might already be orbiting a larger agenda. Cullum being tied to Jen's Sidwell adds another layer, especially considering Ethan's history with Sidwell and what happened with Holly Sutton. I think those old wounds don't just disappear, they resurface in new forms, usually more dangerous than before. What I didn't fully realize until now is how easily this could spiral into something far more serious. If Ethan decides Cullum is a threat, especially after learning what Rocco is tied to, it stops being just family protection or moral conflict. It becomes action, and in Port Charles, action often comes with irreversible consequences. To me, the most unsettling part is that Lulu's instinct is to protect her son at any cost, and Ethan might interpret that as justification rather than warning. That combination is dangerous. It creates a situation where logic gets replaced by loyalty, and loyalty in this world often pushes people into decisions they can't take back. I think Ethan's return isn't just about reconnecting with family or revisiting old ground. It feels more like he's stepping into a web that's already been spun, and whether he realizes it or not, he's becoming one of the key threads holding it together. When I look at the current swirl of questions inside General Hospital, I can't help but feel like there's a missing piece in a puzzle that's been quietly sitting in the background for years. I think the story around Cassius Faison is one of those threads that suddenly feels far more important than it first appeared. To me, everything starts with the long, complicated shadow of General Hospital, especially the legacy of Caesar Faison. For years, the assumption was simple. He was the source of so many of these children's twisted origins, the man behind the chaos. But the more I sit with the timeline, the less that explanation seems to fully hold. I keep coming back to Liesl Obrecht's history. She spent years entangled in Faison's orbit, obsessed with him in a way that shaped so much of her early life. Later, when she had her son Nathan West, she made a very different choice, protecting him by handing him over to her sister, trying to break that cycle of danger tied to Faison. Around her world are figures like Britt Westbourne and even Nathan West, all orbiting that same complicated family history. But then Madeline Reeves enters the picture, and everything becomes even messier. I think what stands out to me is how she raised Nina Reeves's brother, Jay, while also manipulating Nina's life in deeply damaging ways. The idea that she might have also been involved in separating or redirecting Liesl's children doesn't feel impossible in this universe. It actually feels disturbingly consistent with her behavior toward Nina Reeves and her twins, Nell Benson and Willow Kane. And yet, the Cassius question still refuses to settle. If Liesl truly had twins, and if one of them was Nathan West, then what happened to the other child? I find myself wondering if she even knew there was another baby at all, or if she was told a story meant to keep her compliant. Because if she was protecting one child, it's hard to believe she wouldn't have fought just as hard for the other, unless she was never given the chance. That's where the logic starts to fracture. Madeline and her circle don't quite account for Cassius either, and Peter August, also known as Heinrich Faison, doesn't fit the timeline in a way that explains raising another hidden son. He feels more like someone shaped by abandonment rather than upbringing, especially considering how Valentine Cassadine ended up tangled in his life. So I keep circling back to the same unsettling possibility. Maybe Cassius wasn't raised by anyone we already know in that tight Faison-Madeline network. Maybe there was another figure entirely, someone with scientific knowledge, someone capable of imprinting structured thinking, even something as specific as drilling the periodic table into a child's mind. That detail feels deliberate, almost like a signature. And that makes me wonder if the story is quietly steering us toward a larger reveal. Maybe Caesar Faison's family tree isn't fully mapped yet. Maybe there's an older son we never knew about, or even a hidden branch of the family that predates what we've been told about Peter August and the rest of the legacy. I was wondering if Britt Westbourne might eventually uncover something buried in that cold fusion project history, something she didn't fully understand at the time she was pulled into it. It feels like one of those storylines where the truth was always there, just waiting for the right memory, the right flashback, or the right confession to bring it forward. And maybe that's what makes this mystery so compelling. It's not just about who Cassius Faison is, it's about how many versions of the truth have been layered over him, and who benefits from keeping those answers out of reach. I think there's a lot unfolding around Anna Devane right now, and to me it feels like one of those situations where everything is quietly building toward either a daring escape or a carefully executed rescue. Anna is supposedly on her way back to Port Charles, and I can't help wondering how that actually happens, given everything she's been through. From what I understand, she was taken during transport in France after being removed from Windermere, and I was wondering if that moment was really as simple as it sounded, or if it was engineered by someone like Ross Cullum, or maybe even Pascal acting under Cullum's orders. What makes this more unsettling to me is the way Cullum had been targeting Anna psychologically. He wasn't just threatening her directly, he was manipulating her deepest fear, making her believe that Caesar Faison was still alive. And I keep thinking about how powerful that kind of suggestion can be, especially when it's reinforced through drugs or hypnosis. Even seeing Faison's body in the morgue didn't fully break that fear for her, which says a lot about how deeply she was being destabilized. So when I think about her situation in a psychiatric facility in France, I don't automatically see her as helpless. I was wondering if, instead of being formally rescued, Anna might actually find a way to escape on her own. That feels very in character for her. As long as she isn't being heavily medicated or physically restrained in a way she can't work around, I think she has the instincts and intelligence to turn the situation. And I didn't realize at first how compromised that facility might actually be. Even though Kevin Collins recommended it, that doesn't guarantee it's safe. If figures like Cullum or Jen Sidwell have influence, then it's not hard for me to imagine there are already people watching her, controlling information, or limiting who can see her. That could also explain why Emma and Robin Scorpio Drake weren't allowed to visit. Something about that feels intentional, not procedural. At the same time, I keep going back and forth between escape and rescue. On one hand, Anna could be quietly planning something, faking compliance, spitting out medication, gathering small opportunities where she can regain control. I was thinking she's the type who can turn patience into strategy, especially when she's cornered. But on the other hand, there's a growing possibility of a coordinated rescue. Now that parts of the original mission or situation have been questioned, people like Jack Brennan seem to be realizing that Cullum isn't just involved, he's central to what's gone wrong. Even if Brennan was part of pushing Anna out of the WSB, I think there's a shift happening where he now understands she's been taken off the board by someone far more dangerous. And then there's Valentine Cassadine. I didn't expect him to become part of this equation in the way he might be. When Jocelyn Jacks connects the details, Faison's book, the cigarillos, and Cullum's connection to all of it, I think that changes the temperature of everything. To me, that feels like the kind of revelation that doesn't stay contained. It spreads, it escalates, and it forces alliances that wouldn't normally exist. So I find myself thinking, this isn't just about getting Anna home anymore. It feels like a convergence point where different agendas, WSB politics, personal history with Faison, and current criminal networks are all colliding in one place. Whether Anna breaks out on her own or gets pulled out by a coordinated effort, I think the real tension is that both paths are already in motion. I think Willow Kane is reaching a point where everything in her life is piling up faster than she can realistically hold together. and I didn't fully grasp just how many moving pieces she's trying to control at once until I started looking at it as a single picture instead of separate problems. To me, it feels like she's not just dealing with one crisis, but living inside several at the same time. Her political role as Congresswoman Kane already demands a level of composure and discipline that doesn't leave much room for personal chaos. Yet at the same time, she's being pulled into secret dealings with Jen Sidwell, navigating shared custody issues with the children, and carrying the weight of drugging Drew Kane. Each layer alone would be destabilizing, but together, it almost feels like she's constantly one step away from everything collapsing. I keep thinking about how even the smaller pressures around her are not actually small at all. There's Jack Brennan in the background, and then this growing sense that Trina Robinson and Kai Taylor know more than they should. It creates this constant fear of exposure, like she's managing not just her actions, but also the memories and silence of other people. And in situations like that, I feel like paranoia becomes part of daily life, whether she wants it or not. What really stands out to me is her fixation on Jacinda Bracken, and the belief that she needs to remove her from Michael Corinthos's life and away from the children. I didn't realize at first how that decision reflects a deeper instability, but now it reads less like strategy and more like someone trying to control an environment that keeps slipping out of her hands. And then there's the part that feels most dangerous. The idea that Willow might not be the only one who knows what happened with Drew. I was wondering if Alexis Davis could end up becoming the unexpected pressure point in all of this. Rick Lansing turning to Alexis for advice seems, on the surface, like a separate legal discussion about Ethan Lovett and Sonny Corinthos hiring him. But I can't ignore how easily conversations like that tend to drift into deeper territory in Port Charles. I think Nina Reeves involving Rick and the idea of a battered woman defense for Willow adds another layer of tension. Even if it's framed as protection, it quietly suggests preparation for something worse. And that alone could make Rick start questioning what Willow might be capable of next. I don't think he would fully disclose everything, especially with attorney-client boundaries in play, but even partial hints could be enough to plant serious concern in Alexis's mind. To me, this is where things start to shift. If Alexis begins connecting the emotional dots, Nina's fear, Rick's hesitation, Willow's recent behavior, it's not hard to imagine her arriving at a conclusion she may not want to say out loud. That moment where understanding turns into certainty. I keep coming back to the idea that Alexis might eventually confront Willow directly, not as a threat, but as a warning shaped by fear. Something like acknowledging she knows what happened with Drew, but urging Willow to stop before she crosses a line that can't be undone. And I think that kind of confrontation wouldn't land softly. It would feel like the moment Willow realizes that her private choices are no longer private at all. In the end, I'm left with this sense that Willow's path is narrowing. Every decision she makes seems to reduce her options rather than expand them, and I can't help but feel like she's moving through a storyline where pressure doesn't just build, it compounds until something eventually breaks.